Okay, Ole Miss got a commitment from Camarion Franklin. Now what? This could be a defining week for Ole Miss football, period.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis, and this is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. And I do want to let you know that today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Now, Ole Miss got a commitment from Camarion Franklin, and this will just give you an idea of what Ole Miss was going up against before the week, and the way Ole Miss fan base, what they were going up against in the immediate days before the announcement.
Jake, Camarion Franklin making his decision soon. My understanding is it's over this weekend. The 5-star defensive lineman from the state of Mississippi. A lot of crystal balls coming in, pointing Auburn's direction. Sounds like Miami's trying to make a late push. Tennessee's not going anywhere. Ole Miss is begging him to stay home, stay to in the SIP. But are we looking at a situation where Auburn may be picking up its third 5-star in the 2024 class?
Oh, God, just put it on a pillow and smother me to death with it.
The smugness of Auburn and the contempt with Ole Miss. I mean, that is a mainstay. And we've seen all this with the Lane Kiffin situation in October, November. We've seen this situation with recruits over and over again. I think Ole Miss just had its 7th runner rush for 100 yards over last year's game. So I told this weekend, whenever Cam committed, that they've kind of stacked L's on L's on L's, and that's absolutely true. And Alabama and Georgia have gotten so far out of reach for them, so far out of sight for them, there's no way they can even talk to them. So they're trying to find somebody else they can talk to. But now that they're taking all these L's from Ole Miss, they're going to have to move on to another school. But I'm going to tell you something right now. All of this stuff might be fun, and their social media presence might be fun, and everybody laughs about all of that. But Ole Miss being underestimated is a weapon in this situation. Whenever Ole Miss, people consider how organized Ole Miss has become in the NIL space, their fan base has become. What Lane Kiffin has coalesced is absolutely fantastic. And you can see what happened with the Camarion Franklin situation. You know, if you look at the highlights of Camarion Franklin over and over, you see somebody that's some extremely quick twitch, can play multiple places on the defensive line, has the talent to just go anywhere on the field on the defensive line and make an impact for the Ole Miss Rebels. If you want a comparison of what Camarion Franklin could be, like worst case scenario, think Robert Kimdichie in college, where he moved down to 3 technique and just became a dominant defensive tackle. But he could also be somebody that does things like Jared Ivey. And that could be a position that he ends up at. Strong side defensive end. I don't know if I project him as a jack. I've seen people that have called him that have comped him Marcus Davenport, just because of the Pete Golden UTSA connection. But Camarion Franklin's a big-time get, and he is actively recruiting at the moment. And this is leading to what could be an amazingly defining week for Ole Miss football. Ole Miss is on the verge of getting a commitment from Trevor Jackson. Trevor Jackson is a 4-star quarterback out of Orlando. He is who I think he's going to be a dark horse person that we need to pay attention to, that he could end up playing in the Under Armour All-American game just because of his proximity to Orlando. And according to ESPN, he's the 9th quarterback in the country. He's the top-rated, uncommitted quarterback, and Steve Wiltfong has crystal balled him to Ole Miss, and it looks that way. It's at the point where all the commits aren't bombarding him. They've moved on to the next one, and we'll put this up real quick. Trevor Jackson, he is not in the top 300 on 3. He's not in the top 247 on 247. He is ranked 203 on ESPN. He is 120 on Rivals. On ESPN, there you can see he's the 9th rated quarterback in the country. He's the 10th rated quarterback in the country on Rivals. Now, the important thing to remember about Trevor Jackson is he's kind of a late bloomer, but he won the rail toss competition at the Elite 11 in Orlando. He just missed out on going to the finals. He has a super strong arm, and he's unbelievably athletic. He's somebody you should absolutely pay attention to in the future. But another player that is announcing August 25th is Nuril White. And I feel pretty good about this one as well. 247 has him inside the 247. He is not in the top rankings list of On3, ESPN, or Rivals.com, even though he is pretty much a consensus 4-star player, although he is right on the edge on On3. Nuril White was at the Elite 11 in Oxford and completely showed out. Was an absolute baller. He's 6 foot, 190 pounds, out of Ocean Springs, Mississippi. And he is another one that's just created in a lab to play slot at Ole Miss. Now, if you want a comp, I'm not saying he's as good as Elijah Moore, but he's going to play the position similarly to Elijah Moore. I think On3, these recruiting services from time to time, and the reason they vary them is what is the baseline of how they're judging each recruited player. Are you putting more stock in the fact that they're a drop back quarterback or a dual threat or a running quarterback? Same thing happens at wide receiver. And I think with On3, they're looking for a outside type wide receiver, which Nuril White is probably not in the best position to play that position. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens during the season, because I think he has a chance to blow up. He's probably the best athlete on that team. So you may see him on the outside most of the time, but I think whenever he gets to Ole Miss, he projects in the slot. And then you have Aiden Williams, you have the other dudes on that campus. There's so much talent on the Ole Miss football team in the moment. It is absolutely ridiculous. And I'm just absolutely looking forward to this. This could be an absolute, I've said that like 7 times. This could be a defining week for Ole Miss football recruiting in 2024. Ole Miss could come out. We could look up Saturday, and Ole Miss is ranked 19th, 20th in the country in high school recruiting, with still the transfer portal to go. And that is because we do the work, we're extremely organized, and we are creative in the NIL space. And when we come back, we're going to tell you how you can help out and how you can help keep this momentum going with the Grove Collective's Day of Collection, which is today. It starts at 11 o'clock Central at OleMissSports.com. They'll have David Kellum. They've got all the coaches, players. They've got auctions that are going on. Is something you need to tune in for as well. But I do want to let you know that today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you can have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Now, we all know how to create a profile. We've been doing that for 20 years. LinkedIn is the same thing. Whenever, just view it like your Facebook profile or your Twitter profile or X or whatever that is, and you create a profile on LinkedIn. This is where it's different, though. Then you get to add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you are, in fact, hiring. It's got simple tools like screening questions that make it easy to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. You know, whenever you add the right team member, you can have such a positive effect. Think of it like a football coach. When you have a good one, you desperately want to keep them. And when you have a bad one, you can't wait to get rid of them. Think about that when you're making a hire. So this will help you absolutely find the right person for your job. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free on LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. The video for tonight will be the Locked On SEC preview. It's coming up at, I think, 3 Eastern, 2 Central, somewhere around that. And we're just going to leave that up through the night, and you can check that out. All the Locked On hosts are coming on talking about their team, the favorites, all of that. Of course, we deal with a little bit of, let's say, bias as Ole Miss fans as well. But you can check that out. I'm in there trying to defend as best I can. So we'll see exactly what happens. Anyway, today is the day of collection for the Grove Collective. Starts at 11 o'clock Central, 12 o'clock Eastern. Coaches, players, auctions, all of that to try and raise money for the Grove Collective. You saw just this weekend the effect that a top quality NIL group can have on your program. And we have a top 10 collective nationally. And that collective is doing what they can to raise money to go to the next level in recruiting, because we're already doing quite well. We're doing real well at the moment, but we can always get a little bit better as well. Anyway, Walker Jones was on the show Friday night talking about this event. If you want to watch that video, you can go on there. It's on the YouTube channel, and you can hear 20-something minutes of Walker Jones. But this is just a little bit about what that day of collection is.
And we've got a whole day planned of interviews with our head coaches, selected student athletes, our administration, Keith Carter and others, members of our foundation, and also Mayor Tannehill from Oxford to announce a really neat initiative with the city. So it's really going to be a deep dive with all our coaches, how important NIL is, how they can support the collective. It'll be a unique perspective, not just coming from me or from Keith, but coming from all our head coaches, coming from our student athletes, and other people, other stakeholders that are involved in our success. So really excited about people to hear from all that wide array of people, but also too, there's going to be a lot of really neat giveaways, really neat promotions. We're going to be auctioning off a chance to do the Walk of Champions with Lane Kiffin at the Georgia Tech game, some autographed memorabilia from Quinshon Judkins, Lane Kiffin, others. So there'll be some incentives for our people to give and to promote the collection day with some of the opportunities that we're going to raffle off, auction off, make available to reward our people for stepping up. So any Ole Miss fan out there that chooses to continue to give and take part in this day of collection on Monday has a chance to win some really cool stuff. So that's one thing that we're really excited about as part of the bigger day.
Yeah, whenever you look at the Grove Collective in this day of collection, you can understand and see where Walker Jones is coming from. And we're trying to get to the next level of recruiting. And you will see people that try to make snide comments about Ole Miss trying to raise money, but don't be embarrassed about that. Our organization and the fact that we do this is why we are where we are, why we punch above our weight, because we are willing to do that. We don't want just things handed to us. We don't expect things to always be exactly how we plan them to be. And Ole Miss is handling this absolutely the right way. So tune in today to the day of collection. It should be pretty interesting indeed. All right. Well, Ole Miss had a closed scrimmage over the weekend, and not much information has come out of it, honestly. We had some potential news maybe with DeAndre Prince that could be a little bit negative. I don't want to get too far into that. But the scrimmages, apparently all the quarterbacks played well. The tight ends room was really good. The wide receivers played well. It's one of those things to where whenever you're relying on people inside the team, you only get the glowing reviews that's going on. So know that the second scrimmage happened. Nothing really bad happened, which was probably the good news for that. Quinshon Judkins is still in his bubble wrap, and Jackson Dart is still not playing very much at the beginning in scrimmages. So we'll see exactly how this goes. Now, we mentioned my concern with Derek Vandegrift. And I am all about this kinder and gentler fall camp. I get that. But part of me wonders how the conditioning is going to hold up not playing real football or not simulating playing real football in this hot August in Mississippi. Ole Miss has a game at 1:00 on September 2nd against Mercer. This is what we need to pay attention to. If Ole Miss has a cramping issue, if Ole Miss is not exactly conditioned the way they need to do, maybe they're counting on that Mercer game to help play them into shape. Maybe they think they have enough talent to where they can take care of Mercer, Tulane, and Georgia Tech, and by the time they get to Alabama, they'll be good to go. But our concern, and my concern, I should say, going into this season is that this kinder, gentler fall camp, what kind of effect will it have on conditioning? And how will it be when it's 101 degrees on the field whenever the Mercer game happens? How will it be when it's hotter than the surface of the sun when they play Tulane? That will be the two real questions. I'm not really worried about the Georgia Tech game because that's a night game. The Alabama game's towards the end, closer to the end of September, maybe the temperature will start to drop. So those are my questions that I have about Ole Miss going into the season. Now, you've listened to my podcast. You know how over the moon excited I am about this team and what they can accomplish. But if you want negatives and things that you need to be concerned about and things that you need to be looking towards, it's probably that. Because Ole Miss is fine at quarterback, I think. First, second, third, and fourth string, they're probably fine at quarterback. Ole Miss could probably win their first 3 games with any of their 4 quarterbacks play. Seriously. Running back, fine. Quinshon Judkins, Jam Griffin, Kedrick Criscano, and Ulysses Bentley the fourth. That's 4 deep. Absolutely fine, including the best running back in college football. Wide receiver, you've got the emergence of Aiden Williams. You've got the emergence of Braylon Brown. Although he is in show me mode, I am not going to fall for this again. I need to see what exactly happens, but he has shown up on the clips that they put out multiple times of him making amazing catches. Again, an unbelievably talented wide receiver that could make this team a lot better. Offensive line is doing absolutely what they need to do. Defensive line, same thing. They've built up, I think, the starting 4 across the front right now. My guess that from what I've seen, would be like Cedric Johnson, JJ Pegues, Stephon Wynn, I think, has made a move there. And Jared Ivey is doing quite well. Jared Ivey is kind of quietly going about his business in camp this year. And the fact that you just do not hear him up and down and there's not been any movement on that side of the ball tells you exactly the type of year that he potentially is going to have. At linebacker, the one thing that has popped up and everybody is talking about, Suntarine Perkins. Is he going to start? Is he just going to be a heavy rotational player? I think he's going to play a good bit. I think he's going to be in the rotation. I think Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste has kind of surged a little bit in fall camp with all the injuries and everything. I think Monty Montgomery, kind of pencil him in as a starter at this point. And then Ashanti Seastruck, you don't hear much about him, negative or positive, so it kind of goes in that Jared Ivey camp. So I think Ashanti Seastruck just might be behind the Monty Montgomery situation. So maybe it's a Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste and Suntarine Perkins. And we also have to deal with Ladarius Tennyson when he comes back. Now, the rumor on DeAndre Prince is he got into a little bit of trouble. I'm not going to go into that. If you want information, look online. It's all there. But I'm not worried about cornerback at Ole Miss. If you told me it was Deshaun Gaddy and Zamari Walton last week, just as much as today, I'm not surprised. At cornerback, with the coverage that Ole Miss has, I'm not worried about those positions. There's people that can cover wide receivers all over the field. I would be more worried about linebacker than cornerback. Now, other than the heat, the thing that you probably need to worry about, if you need the worries and the things to think about of something that could go wrong for Ole Miss, it could be punting. And we're all going to worry about punting and to see exactly how that goes for Ole Miss as well, because Ole Miss has to be able to kick the ball further than 32 yards. They need to add about 10 yards of field position. That's hidden yardage. If you do not punt the ball well, that's 10 yards immediately that you have given up. You've given up a first down with a poor punt every single possession. You need to find somebody that can really punt the football and flip the field as well. Anyway, I'm really excited. We are going to do our week 0 lines. Every Monday we do lines, and we start in week 0 to kind of knock the rust off a little bit. So we just want to talk about football, real football. We're going to talk about the lines coming up in that. So stick around. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis, and this is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, and we are talking lines. The week 0 lines are out. The week 0 games are 5 days away. We are about 10 days away, or no, less than that. We're about 10 days away from the Thursday night games with like Florida and Utah and all of those big games happening for week 1. But we got to get through week 0 first. And let's talk about the lines that are going on in those games. Your week 0 lines, the biggest game of the week is probably Navy and Notre Dame. I get why Notre Dame plays in Ireland. I do. I still can't get over the Northwestern Nebraska game in Ireland last year. But I get why this game would happen. The Fighting Irish, they're probably going to sell out that stadium. Notre Dame is a 20.5-point favorite over the Midshipmen. As you can see in my background, I am rooting for Navy in this game. I am all about Navy. I think this is the first year without Ken Niumatalolo. And Notre Dame, at the end of the year, was a pretty good team. And now they have Sam Hartman playing quarterback. So we can get an idea of what the Fighting Irish is going to look like going up against the Midshipmen as well. Second game of the day, you got the UMass Minutemen versus the New Mexico State Aggies. New Mexico State is favored by 7.5 points, which makes me just feel terrible for UMass. My goodness, this might be the worst team in FBS. But New Mexico State being favored more than a touchdown over you, that's something to speak of. Now, we'll see exactly what happens. I think New Mexico State ended up going to a bowl game last year. They kind of got in at the last second. So we'll see exactly how that goes. Hawaii versus Vanderbilt, the Renovation Bowl that is being happening in Nashville. Vanderbilt is a 17.5-point favorite. If the New Mexico State statement was said earlier about this game, that's absolutely true as well. The Rainbows got beat by 50-something points by the Commodores last season. Vanderbilt is looking to be a much improved team this year. A.J. Swan and Will Shepherd are weapons offensively. We'll see what they do on the running back position, at the tight end position, and how they look defensively. They got a couple of transfers. It will be really interesting to see what they do. But Vandy is a 17.5-point favorite. FIU is going to Ruston, Louisiana, playing Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech is a 10.5-point favorite in that game. Sonny Cumbie coaching the Louisiana Tech Bulldogs. FIU, I believe, is coached by Mike McIntyre. So it will be interesting to see. This is Mike McIntyre obviously was the Ole Miss defensive coordinator in 2019. But FIU is trying to resurrect itself. FAU has kind of left them for the time being. It's just the way it is. But FIU is trying to become real relevant. They are probably the poorest school in FBS for whatever reason. So it's going to be a tough game for the Panthers, but Louisiana Tech, a 10.5-point favorite. UTEP is favored by 1.5 at Jacksonville State. That's Rich Rod's team. So you're going to see that offense, that those players that Rich Rod can absolutely just seemingly find and can make them into weapons. UTEP, they've gotten better the last couple of years. They genuinely have. There was about a 5-year period where they were pretty dreadful, but they've gotten better. Jacksonville State, I'm not sure about this, but I think they're transitioning to FBS this year. They're either doing it this year or next year, but I think it's this year, and they're going into Conference USA. So that's why there's a line posted, and this isn't a no-line game. So I think it's this year. But UTEP is a 1.5 favorite over Jacksonville State. Ohio, the Bobcats, is playing San Diego State, who is a 3-point favorite out in San Diego with tropical storm. I don't know exactly what it'll make landfall as, but there's a tropical system that is flowing around the Pacific that is heading that direction, that game might be in some kind of a jeopardy depending on what type of a rain event or whatever happens, but we'll keep an eye on that as well. But San Diego State's a 3-point favorite over the Ohio Bobcats. San Jose State is playing USC. USC is favored by 30.5 points. Lincoln Riley has them ready to go. Now, just like Oklahoma was whenever he was at Oklahoma, USC is Charmin soft defensively. Their defense last year was absolutely abysmal, but their quarterback play is probably the best in the country. Heisman winner on their team. They're going to make plays offensively. They're doing really active stuff in the transfer portal. Their NIL collective is I think it's the Peristol or something like that, is unbelievably good as well. USC is going to be competitive for a little bit. 2024, though, they go to the Big Ten with UCLA, Oregon, and Washington, and there could be a dynamic shifted as well there. And our last game on week 0 is Kent State at UCF. UCF is a 35-point favorite. Kent State lost their coach to Colorado to be the offensive coordinator. UCF is quarterbacked by John Rice Plumlee. And the Golden Knights is making their debut in the Big 12. There's a lot of stuff going on there now that I talk about it. UCF is expected to be a good program this season and transition very well. They're going to be superior to Kent State. I guess technically UCF now is a Power 4 program, or this year a Power 5 program. So good for UCF. The Knights, they're not the Golden Knights. They're just the Knights, and they will fight you if you call them Central Florida instead of UCF. So it should be pretty interesting indeed what happens. Well, that's the lines. I went through them this week. Whenever we get to the SEC games, it'll be SEC only. This was just a kind of a warm-up week to get me ready to start doing it and figuring out the workflow processes of getting it done. So it was pretty fun indeed. Anyway, thank you very much for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Also, we're transitioning to game week for Ole Miss, which means our video schedule might change a little bit. It might not be happening when it normally does. We apologize for that, but game week requires us to do things a little bit differently. So stick around for that. Check out everything. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Tell a friend. Get them to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're trying to hit 4,500 subscribers before Mercer, which is about 2 weeks away. That's going to be really hard to do, but heck, why not try to do it, right? Anyway, we will see you tomorrow. And of course, hotty toddy.